Good morning. Good morning, all. At a time when Russian airstrikes have been unleashed in Syria and the world's attention is focused on the tragedy there, the question arises as to what are Russian President Vladimir Putin's goals, objectives? One certainly is to divert attention from the current situation in Ukraine. The illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia and the invasion of eastern Ukraine, as well as the undermining and the outright violation of not only the Budapest Memorandum, but also the various international covenants related to the sovereignty of Ukraine, has been undermined. Over 1,000 people have died, and 1.5 million in Ukraine have been displaced. And at the same time, the Minsk Accords, which call for a ceasefire, have not held. President Putin was interviewed recently on 60 Minutes. And on that occasion, and in that interview, he spoke of the right of the Syrian people to choose their own destiny. A question before us is, what about the right of the Ukrainian people to choose their own destiny? We remember seeing so many out in the streets in the Maidan. Why? Because their destiny and their desire and their choice is to have Ukraine become part of the European Union and to bring about robust economic change and advancement for Ukraine. Ukraine needs our support, politically, economically, and militarily. It is in our interest, not only that of the United States, but also the West. Why? Because Ukraine does matter. Peace, stability, and security has to be maintained there. It has ramifications for the continent at large and no less beyond. But at the same time, let me also add, Ukraine also needs to undertake those policies to bring about significant reform and change, which is absolutely essential to its growth and its advancement. The next panel is really going to be a very vibrant one and interesting one. It's entitled The Ukrainian Dilemma. It will address the challenges confronting Kiev. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Stephen Nix, who is the Regional Director for Eurasia at the International Republican Institute, and ask him and the very distinguished panelists who will join him on stage. Join me in applause in welcoming them.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today in what many of us feel is the most topical question facing the world today, and that is the situation in Ukraine, regionally, internationally. We have a very distinguished panel that has very detailed knowledge of these subject areas. It's my pleasure to introduce them to you now. Starting with my left, former President of Ukraine, Viktor Andreevich Yushchenko. Former President of the Republic of Georgia and currently serving Ukraine as Governor of Odessa, Mikheil Saakashvili. Esteemed former President of Poland, President Kwaśniewski. Member of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine, Ms. Hanna Hopko. And also joining us from the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Mariia Ionova. We're going to have a series of questions for our guests from me, and then we invite those of you in the audience who have questions to do so through the devices that you've been given. So feel free to ask questions, and we'll do that towards the end of the program. Starting with you, Mariia, very importantly, the Minsk peace agreement, although very fragile, seems to be working. In fact, the separatists have recently agreed to redeploy small and medium arms away from the conflict zone. Is Minsk working? Do you see a diplomatic solution to this conflict? Can the Donbass situation be resolved to the satisfaction of the government in Kiev? Mariia, the floor is yours.
Dear guest, Your Excellencies, distinguished guest, I would like to begin my speech with the words of Abraham Lincoln. The struggle of today is not altogether for today. It is for the vast future also. And also, I would like to start with the photos which now symbolized of Ukraine. This is unity. It's revolution of dignity. The next one, please. It's freedom and liberty. Next, please. Revolution. That's our 2 years now of the process. Now it's betrayed treasures and war, kindness, love, hope. That means motherland and future. So this is our future, and when we are talking about Donbass, when we are talking about Ukraine, when we are talking about Crimea, this is our country and this is our future. And our achievement for all these fights, it's that we have been identified ourselves as Ukrainians. And it doesn't matter what language do we speak, we now Ukrainians. And about Minsk agreement, of course, we really thankful to the whole international coalition who help us to fight against aggressor Russian Federation. But I would like to say that unfortunately, the Minsk agreement doesn't implement it, and implemented only by one partner. It's Russia Federation. Last month, since we only hear that Ukraine didn't implement this, this, and this. But I would like to say that the ceasefire, it doesn't mean peace. To withdraw a small weapon, it doesn't mean that to withdraw and to take away the whole weapon. And the main question is to close our border. And this is the main question. And we think that while all this complex of items of Minsk agreement will not be implemented, we are not able to talk, about success or that we have done this, this, and this. That is why I would like to say that Donbass issue is really very connected with the economy. It's really very interrelated. And also, when we are talking about Donbass, we do not have to forget about Crimea. And here, as on these days, we had the 17th session of the UN General Assembly. I would like to just a few minutes of to say a few words about UN. That very often in social media we hear UNGA. So what letters mean? Yes. These letters stands for United Nations, and nations that united after the Second World War to protect the fundamental values and rights. These include both human rights, including a right for peaceful life, and fundamental principles of international politics, such as territorial integrity and sovereignty of states. But we hear that one of the members of United Nations in the 21st century, in my country, with my people, we see the military aggression by Russian Federation on the territory of Ukraine. And Russia was not called a terrorist state, rarely even called an aggressor. And not least because Russia is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So, and also Russia has a veto on the proper investigation of MH17. And, you know, it's more global, global question. But anyway, Donbass and Crimea, this is a result of not adequate response to aggressor who has violated main principles and values and, of course, international rule of law. And what I would like to say that, of course, now it's impossible to build a prosperous and stable economy while we stand against the second most powerful army in the world. And therefore, the burden on our shoulders is very heavy, but we are ready to carry it on, but it is our common responsibility of all United Nations countries to withstand evil, which is disguised in a peacekeeper. And I would like to say that we are grateful for international support and solidarity, for technical, for financial, for humanitarian support and aid. But we have to be more tough, and we have to fight more hardly for our common principles and values. And only after that, we will win and we will fight and we will make a secure European continent.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariia, for that excellent presentation in response to the question. Hanna Hopko, the question for you is next. Decentralization and local government reform has been a big part of the Kiev government's reform agenda. IRI polling, and we do a lot of polling in your country, shows that 67% of the population supports the president's decentralization program. You had a first reading in the parliament. Now it requires, these package of amendments require a constitutional majority. What are the prospects for adoption of this package in the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine? How will it be implemented? What do you foresee in terms of true reform of local government in Ukraine? The floor is yours.
Thank you for your questions, dear participants of Concordia Summit. It's a big honor and duty to be here today and update you with the situation in Ukraine, because there are lots of reforms going on in Ukraine, and the change makers generation and state builders are fighting for better future of Ukraine. Among our priorities, anti-corruption, decentralization, judiciary reforms, police reforms, that with the support of United States and our foreign partners already, we could see the new policemen in different cities of Ukraine. And also, as for the decentralization, it's crucial for Ukraine and critical, like Poland did almost 20 years ago, to decentralize our country and to give more power, more financial resources, and more responsibility to local communities. And Ukrainian parliament passed in the first reading the law on decentralization, which are the part of constitutional changes, amendments. And I do hope that till the end of this year, we will pass in second reading, and all Ukrainian communities and cities will give more resources. And also this year, Ukrainian parliament passed law on budget decentralization, and extra revenues already are in different mayors, city councils. And it's important to provide help for all communities how to build strategies of development for next 5–10 years. And I think that it's important to break down this vertical usurpation of powers that we used to have for many years. And with the spirit of people after dignity revolution, when people at local levels want to be responsible for their future. And decentralization is one of the instruments to provide them with more power, more responsibility for their future.
Thank you, Hanna. Thank you very much for your response. President Kwaśniewski, Poland has been one of Ukraine's most stalwart supporters in terms of its pursuit of alliances within the Euro-Atlantic Alliance and EU integration. What more can the European Union do to help Ukraine integrate? What more can Poland do? And finally, what else, what in addition can Ukraine do to expedite the process and fulfill Ukraine's aspirations as dictated by the Maidan for a place in Europe? The floor is yours, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, it's necessary to say that decision about the future of the country, of the sovereign country, is a decision of this nation, of this country, and first of all, that is, let's say, homework. And I'm very happy that Ukraine is doing this very difficult, our colleagues told us something about it, this homework, because without that, without this determination, work, a lot of decisions, reforms, you know, that is impossible to support, and even supporting Ukraine from the abroad, that is not enough. Yesterday I met Christine Lagarde, the chief of IMF. I asked her again because she said some weeks ago that she is very satisfied with the result of
Restructurization.
Yeah, of reforms in Ukraine, and I said, I asked her yesterday, that was encouraging compliment or it is truth. And she's a very tough woman. She's not very nice for compliments, and she told me that well, that's a reality. The Ukraine did a lot in the last months, and I think that is necessary to underline that Ukraine is going forward. Then the West, the Europe, European Union, Poland, what we can do. The first, and I think that is the most important, we should support Ukraine every day. We cannot make deal with Russia because of Syria, because of Muslim state, because of other things, because Ukraine deserved very much as a nation, as a people of dignity, as a sovereign state, to be supported on this democratic way. We don't know what will be on the end of this road. I'm sure that the end will be very positive and we'll have a Ukraine, the family of European Union, but that is a long way. But today, I think the most important, what we can propose to Ukraine, what we can offer to Ukraine, is our solidarity, our understanding, and our support. And sometimes I'm afraid that because the life is going very quickly, we have new problems, we have new challenges, and some countries and some leaders are ready to make a deal with Russia, selling, frankly speaking, Ukraine. And that is something what we should know. That is immoral, that is impossible, that we cannot do it. We should support Ukrainian sovereignty, we should support this young woman, very determined on this way to democracy, to freedom, and to strong position in democratic community. Second, of course, politically, I think it's necessary to do two things. Minsk agreement, which is not ideal agreement, but should be in 100% implemented. Then we should support economically Ukraine, because the situation in this country is extremely dramatic. We should invest. We should fight for more trade with Ukraine, and that is possible. That is everything what we can do as a European Union or in the United States. Of course, having Ukraine as stable as now, because we don't know what will happen next. But today, I think this country is a good partner for all of us to start to make business and to invest money. And third point, I think politically for European Union, the United States is very important to understand the strategy of Russia didn't change. The main problem today, still like 1 year, 2 years ago, is the same. Russia wants to have Ukraine in own zone of influence, as a part of own zone of political influence, as a part of Eurasian Union or in different style. And because of this strategy, and this strategy didn't change, even because of sanctions, even due low prices of oil or Syria or some other things, the strategy of Russia is very constant, is very serious, and is long-lasting strategy. And finally, because of Russia wants to have Ukraine own zone of influence, the task, the obligation, the moral duty of the West, of all of us sitting here, is to support all these efforts, all these actions which we can see now in Ukraine for democracy, for freedom, for independence, and for sovereignty. Easy? Not easy, but necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Governor Saakashvili, you have the unique role of having served as the head of state of a neighboring country and are now serving as a governor in Odessa Oblast. You have a very strong pro-reform agenda in Odessa. What are the key challenges to reform in Odessa? What are the key obstacles? And tell us, please, what are the prospects for reform in Odessa?
Well, first of all, let me specify why I switched from one position to another, because some people are asking this question. First of all, I've lived in Ukraine almost 10 years of my life. I can identify with the nation a lot, and including the culture, the language, and indeed we are very similar in many ways. There are lots of similarities between Georgia and Ukraine. And more than that, you know, the Odessa is an absolutely key strategic area for Ukraine, south of Ukraine. That was initially the main prize for Putin, which he wanted to get after Crimea. And Odessa is, I mean, the idea when I was going there was that if Odessa would, God forbid, fall, then it would mean end of Ukraine's Union statehood as we know it. So it's really, it was quite a precarious situation last year and earlier this year. But when I went there, security was not the main concern I had. I still believe that the best way to secure any place is to develop it, to move fast, to combat corruption, to move away from Soviet way of life. Because actually what people were going after, or what people wanted to get, those people who backed or were kind of complacent to Russian invasion was exactly the Soviet way of life. So if you keep status quo, then you keep Soviet way of life, you keep nostalgia, and there is some place to go back to. If you change that and if you create something else, then there is no point of return to anywhere. Putin basically plays not on ethnic feelings, he plays on feelings of status quo and mostly the Soviet kind of nostalgic type kind of thing. And indeed, Vice President Biden was just right. Corruption is their soft power. Oligarchs are their soft power. This anti-Western rhetoric saying, don't go there, it's so dangerous, it's their soft power. He finally found his soft power, and it has nothing to do with the economy or development. So in order to depose that, to kind of oppose that soft power, we need to do something else. In Odessa, we are doing several things. First of all, I'm trying in a microcosm something that needs to be done in the rest of Ukraine. That's to change the whole Ukrainian political elite, which means that we are basically bringing all new people. We had changed all to heads of district administration. We had 26 districts in Odessa. Odessa is a place of almost 3 million people, more or less, together with IDPs from the conflict areas. And so it's the largest place in Ukraine. It's the largest district in Ukraine, so largest region. So what we did is we fired all heads of administration, recruited total new people from out of 7,000 applicants through very competitive 3-round testing and interviews. And we have now people here who are the London School of Economics graduate. We have administration people who are Harvard graduate, the Cornell University, Cambridge University of England. So people who would never make it to the Ukrainian public service in the past. We fired half of our civil servants. And we certainly changed the entire traffic police. We fired the entire traffic police and brought in new patrol police. Nobody from old police force. This is done in coordinated way at the central government level, but we also did it in Odessa as well. We are now changing basically every prosecutor. And we are certainly recruiting new people at every level of administration. So changing people is very important. The other thing is simplifying procedure. And what we did is that we basically brought together into this one public service hall space as pilot project for the first time in Ukraine, something we did already very successful in Georgia, where you could bring all the services under one roof, everything you want from the government, and you get this within a few minutes or maximum within 1 day. Now it takes sometimes months, and it almost always takes to pay bribe before you get it. So that's another big breakthrough which we are achieving. The third one is that we are trying to do electronic customs now against the backdrop of huge resistance from old conservative elements. What is electronic customs? That is to say, fire all the customs officials, basically put just young people there for just reception functions, but the rest is decided by software, computer software. There is no discretion for any civil servant, any customs officers, any bureaucrat. We are already building these customs terminals. Hopefully they will become operational by the end of this year. And every container would go through maximum within 15 minutes. No more than 5% will be checked thoroughly. And out of that 5%, it will be maximum 1 hour, then they need to be released, and at the expense of the customs, all of this. That's another big change in fiscal collection. Now, when we talk about challenges, we have two challenges. One, on the one hand, it's, of course, Russia. And one has to realize the Minsk agreement works or not works. The main thing that happened that Russia was militarily contained. It's a huge defeat for Putin. Russia had not been defeated or contained by any nation in Europe for all these decades. I mean, in Georgia, we managed to save our statehood, but they advanced quite far, and it took intervention by President Bush to stop them at the end. Here, there was no intervention from anybody, except, of course, there were sanctions and other things, but militarily, Ukrainians did it. Ukrainians, despite like almost 7,000 or 8,000 people, depending upon the figures you look at, killed. But the thing is that Russians got huge military losses, and they're very sensitive to those losses. And the only reason why they didn't bomb Ukraine because they knew that Ukrainians had very good air defenses, and they would shoot down all their planes, and it would be a disaster. But they used all the artillery they had, they used all their elite units they had, and they couldn't really advance. And that's a miracle. And that's something that, and this is a nation in the middle of Europe. And this was the history when we talk about what it destabilizes. The largest country in the world attacking militarily the largest country in Europe. It's a world-scale disaster. And no matter how you try to downplay it, that's what it is all about. And then this is this nation in Europe, one of very few exceptions, that basically is not scared of Russians. Ukrainians are not afraid of the Russians. And that's very important because psychologically they think that they will never look back to Moscow and say, what will Moscow think if we change this and that? They're reforming, and I know very few nations in Europe, maybe Poland is one of them, that are not scared of Russians. Ukrainians are not anymore. And that's very much due to what Viktor Yushchenko did in his presidency to bring up Ukrainian identity, to give them the sense of nationhood, statehood, cultural differences, etc. But also what these soldiers did, without being, Ukraine being basically abandoned, not given military help, despite the guarantees from Budapest Memorandum, and still they managed to do it. And so, and another big thing which I think President Poroshenko did very smartly is to invite lots of foreigners to serve in the government. Now, I know that different Ukrainians are saying different Ukrainian politicians are saying different things. I've not seen any problems with the population with that. I'm another case, I speak Ukrainian, I've lived in Ukraine, but there are also other foreigners they brought in, some Americans, some Georgians, and this is another thing which people didn't understand. People didn't understand in the West what Georgia reform stood for. We were always automatically suspect. Georgia was a weird country, and because they didn't want to blame Russia, they blamed us for war, because they couldn't really believe that Georgia from the World Bank ranking of ease of doing business moved from 137 to number 8 position, very close behind Singapore and the United States. They couldn't really believe how it was possible. But Georgia, what Westerners didn't understand, Ukrainians understand. That Georgian reforms are really radical and exactly the same things which they want to get. So from that standpoint, we got very successful case with police reform and prosecutors reform. We have top prosecutor from Georgia running now, prosecuted by doing the biggest and highest profile cases in Ukraine. We have now #2 at the anti-corruption service from my government, who is preparing quite some cases, as I could figure out. And there is head of, basically, the lady that conducted Ukrainian police reforms from Georgia. Together with the Americans we did it, but she did it. She did it with her Georgian team. And it's a copycat of what we did to Georgia. And that's such an amazing example that you transplant not only the reform experience from one country to another, but you also transplant basically politicians. And but these countries have matching DNAs. And I think there is this reform experience. For instance, in my regional administration, we have now Mariia Ionova, who is like, she's the member of this famous Russian dynasty, Soviet dynasty, basically. Her father was the main Russian economic reformer, of those who remember. And she basically took Ukrainian nationality, learned Ukrainian, attends every day Ukrainian soldiers because she's running the social issues at the hospitals and IDPs from conflict zones. She totally remodeled herself as Ukrainian because we believe that everything that we achieve here will change. What we achieve in Odessa will change Ukraine. What will change Ukraine will change not only like smaller countries, but it also will change Russia irreversibly and the whole post-Soviet zone. That's what this fight is all about. It's about way of life, about and indeed, Ukrainians did something that in Middle Ages, maybe like Habsburgs did. Basically protected Europe from these influences that were trying to take over from the East. Exactly the same kind of experience from modern epoch. And they need much more credit than they're getting for that. Of course we have issues. We have problems with Russia, but we also have problems with ourselves. Ukraine is at conflict with its own self. Biden was right yesterday, Vice President. Corruption is the main core of that conflict. But with new generation coming up, you know, Ukraine was saved and Europe was saved by younger soldiers and the younger officers. Younger reformers will change the political elite and they will change the whole Ukraine and they'll remodel the post-Soviet sphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Saakashvili. President Yushchenko. Governor Saakashvili alluded to this, but I'd like to press you in greater detail. Some say that the conflict in eastern Ukraine extends far beyond Ukraine and is really a regional and international conflict. They say Ukraine is fighting for its own sovereignty and territorial integrity, but it's also fighting for those same values for Europe and Eurasia. How do you respond to this? Does this conflict have implications, and what would you say to your colleagues in Europe and Eurasia about the conflict? Pan President, будь ласка.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Шановні друзі,
Dear friends,
присутні.
distinguished
Я думаю, для
audience,
того, щоб розібратися, що відбувається на
I
сході
think
Європи,
in order to understand what's happening in
нам
the
чітко
eastern
треба сформулювати
part
дефініцію.
of Europe today, it is very important to begin with proper definitions.
Перший крок до того, щоб дійти до істини, починається з правильних визначень.
The number one step towards resolving the problem begins with proper definitions of things that are happening.
Що відбувається на сході України?
So what happens in the east of Ukraine today?
В редакції Путіна це громадянська війна.
According to President Putin, this is a civil war,
Це коли українці борються з
which means
українцями.
that one group of Ukrainians kills another group of
Що
Ukrainians.
це сепаратистський рух.
Putin says that this is an established separatist movement,
Я вам стверджую, що це брехня.
but I say that this is not true.
У нас ніколи не було
We have never had a civil war
громадянського конфлікту
in Ukraine,
гарячого типу
a hot
за 300
civil
років, за
war
400.
over the last 300,
Ми ясно
400 years.
виражена унітарна держава з 10
We have
століття.
been a unitary state since the 10th century.
Насправді на сході України йде війна.
In the east of Ukraine, we have a war.
Агресивна окупаційна російська
It is
війна.
an aggressive Russian aggression and a war where Russia invades territories of Ukraine.
Але визнати навіть це половина правди.
To say that and to acknowledge that would be 50% of the job.
Подивіться, будь ласка, на політичну карту
Look
Європи.
at the political map of Europe today.
Вас не турбує, що на сході Європи сьогодні 6 конфліктів?
Are you not concerned with the fact that today in Europe we have 6 conflicts?
10 років назад у нас
10 years
було
ago,
на сході Європи 2 заморожених
There were
конфлікти.
2 frozen conflicts on the territory of the Eastern Europe.
Сьогодні втричі більше.
Today they increased threefold.
Що відбувається в Нагорному Карабахі?
What happens in Nagorno-Karabakh today?
У мого друга у Південній Осетії,
In my
Абхазії,
friend's country, in Abkhazia, in South
Придністров'я,
Ossetia, in Transnistria,
Крим,
in the Crimea,
Донбас.
in Donbass.
Ви не звернули увагу, що стороною конфлікту в усіх цих
In all those areas,
нестабільностях є Росія.
Russia is always a side of the conflict.
І тому, коли, знаєте, називають конфлікт на сході
So when
України
you call what
українським
happens
питанням,
in Ukraine a Ukrainian issue or
Я не
a
хочу з цим
Ukrainian
погодитися.
conflict, I would like to disagree with
точно
that.
так, як у Південній Осетії чи
Just
Абхазії, це
like
не
in
грузинське
South
питання.
Ossetia and Abkhazia,
Чи
it is not a
Придністров'ї, це не
Georgian
молдовське
issue.
питання.
Things in Transnistria are not just a Moldovan issue.
Я хочу заявити,
And I want to say
що
that
на сході Європи
today in the eastern part of Europe,
створений один із самих широких
one of the
поясів,
wider belts of
нестабільності.
instability was created.
І це вже конфлікт, який переростає межі
And these
європейських безпекових
conflicts are
інтересів.
outgrowing the interests of the European security policies and models.
І тому не треба запитувати,
And
по
that
кому
is why
дзвонить
do
дзвін.
not ask about for whom the bell tolls.
Війну, яку веде сьогодні Україна з
The
Росією,
war that Ukraine has
боронячи
today
Європу,
with Russia, when Ukraine protects
цей
Europe,
конфлікт має виключно геополітичний
this
вимір.
conflict has a purely geopolitical dimension to it.
Хочу уточнити,
Once again,
Путіну не бракує, скільки, Міша, в Осетії Південній?
Putin does
Kilometers
not
квадратних
need
площі.
this
Мало,
certain
10
number of
тисяч
square kilometers of land of South Ossetia and Abkhazia.
Путіну не землю треба.
Putin does not need lands
Путіну
or
навіть не
territories.
території треба.
He does not even need
Путіну
territories.
потрібен простір.
He needs space.
Путін вибудовує геополітичний,
Putin builds his new
середньовічний,
geopolitical,
феодальний,
medieval, imperial
політики.
policy and center of
І
influence.
тому, коли ми
And
хочемо
that
знайти
is why,
відповідь,
if we want to find
на яку
an
не дали
answer,
відповідь ні по Нагорному Карабаху, ні по Грузії, ні по Молдові,
that and a resolution for the conflict that was never provided to Nagorno-Karabakh or Ossetia or Abkhazia,
нам треба виходити з того, що це наша солідарна
we
спільна
need to
відповідальність.
understand that first of all, it is our joint responsibility to do
У нас
this.
повинен бути єдиний план
We
врегулювання
need a consolidated
конфлікту
plan
на Донбасі.
for the resolution of the
Конфлікту в
situation in
Криму.
Donbass, for the Crimean situation.
І очевидно, першим
And of course,
компонентом, про
the
який
number
треба
one
говорити,
component that should be mentioned
це компонент дипломатичний.
is a diplomatic component, diplomatic
жаль,
efforts. Unfortunately,
Ми мусимо говорити про те,
we
що
have to
нормандський
say
формат
that the Normandy
за рік
format
роботи не
over
досяг
12 months of
бажаного.
its
Мінський
existence was
формат,
not
на жаль,
effective.
за рік роботи не досяг бажаного.
The Minsk agreement was not effective. It did not reach its ultimate goal of bringing peace and
Вогонь не
stability.
припинений,
Війська
не відведені.
Ceasefire is not completed. It's not effective.
полоненим по принципу
The
всіх на всіх
exchange of the
обмін
prisoners
не
of war
зроблений,
has not been
контроль
completed.
над кордоном не
The
встановлений.
arms have not been pulled away by
Тобто ми
one
починаємо
side.
відчувати, що
We were
нам
not-
треба привносити дипломатичну
We were
модернізацію.
not able to re-establish control over our borders. That's why we think that all those
21 рік
formats
назад Україна добровільно розсталася з ядерним
have to be
арсеналом.
re-established. If you remember, 21 years ago, Ukraine has voluntarily refused from its nuclear potential.
Великої таємниці не скажу, що це було одне з настирливих прохань Сполучених Штатів Америки.
It would not be a great secret if I say that Ukraine did it at the request of the United States of America most.
Взамін 21 рік назад ми
In
отримали
exchange,
винятковий механізм гарантування територіальної цілісності і політичного суверенітету України.
in exchange for one of the largest nuclear potentials in the world 25 years ago, Ukraine received guarantees of its territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Україна сьогодні втратила територіальну цілісність.
Today, our territorial integrity has been
Політичний
compromised, and our political sovereignty is gone.
За браком часу я спрощую нашу дискусію
I don't have much time, and I will simplify our
і,
discussion.
можливо, в
And
гостях
probably,
задаю некоректне запитання.
I am, as a guest, my question will be probably politically incorrect.
Де наші
But I would
американські
like to
друзі?
say, where are our American
Де
friends?
сторона, яка гарантувала нам територіальну цілісність?
Where are the countries, and this specific country that once guaranteed our territorial integrity and sovereignty?
Де Велика Британія?
Where is Great Britain in this
Де Великий
process?
Китай?
Great China.
Я Росію не коментую.
I'm not commenting on
Росія
Russia.
ніколи не
Russia
виконує підписані
Never
договори.
complies on anything it signs.
Я говорю про ті країни, які
I'm
повинні
talking about the
збагнути,
countries that have to understand
що сьогодні
that
руйнується
today
світовий каркас
the world
безпекової моделі.
security model has been compromised and undermined.
Знаєте, якщо в світі не спрацьовують
If today
ядерного клубу гарантії територіальної цілісності України,
provided by the nuclear club countries are not working,
у
then
нас не
the next
залишається жодного
question is
принципу,
that we don't have a single other
який би
principle
врегульовував
that would help regulate
територіальну цілісність, державний суверенітет
the issues of territorial integrity and sovereignty
будь-якої нації,
of
будь-якої держави.
countries, of any nation, of any country in the
Насправді,
world.
не
In
треба
reality,
запитувати, по кому дзвонить
Once
дзвін.
again, do not ask a question for whom the bell tolls.
І я сподіваюся,
And
що
I hope that
і такі дискусії, як ми сьогодні
the
проводимо,
discussion that we have today
нас приведуть до того,
will
що
eventually lead us
цією проблемою почне займатися на кінець-то Європейський Союз,
to the reality when finally the European Union gets
Чи Європейський
seriously
парламент.
involved on Ukraine, or the European Parliament
адже я повторюю,
that
це
gets
шостий
seriously
конфлікт
involved,
на
because
сході
once again it is the sixth
благополучної,
conflict
начебто стабільної Європи.
In the eastern part of prosperous and stable Europe.
За столом появляться гаранти,
And probably after Europe realizes that, we finally
столом
have countries
появляться
who
гарні
guaranteed
комунікатори,
our territorial integrity and sovereignty,
яким для
sitting
нас
and
завжди
negotiating.
є країна, яку представляє мій друг
And I
Олександр.
hope we will have countries who will help communicate this process, such countries as the country that my friend President Kwaśniewski represents,
Другим словом, ми
Poland.
повинні зрозуміти,
We have to understand
зупинити Путіна можна двома
that we can
способами.
stop Putin by two means.
Реакцією російського
Number
народу,
one is the internal reaction of the people of Russia,
який любить царів,
which has yet to come because the Russian people love the idea of
мало
having a czar.
любить свободу і
They
незалежність,
don't appreciate freedoms and liberties
але
that
все-таки
much.
там відбувається
But
перетворення.
still there are things happening in Russia that give us hope for the future
І друге,
transformation.
можливо, що більш
And the
важливіше,
second thing that Putin is afraid of, that is probably even more
це
important,
солідарність світу.
is the solidarity of the world on
Найбільше,
the
чого
issue.
боїться і остерігається Путін,
And the biggest thing that
це
Putin is
нашої з вами спільної
afraid of is of
оцінки
our joint
і узгодженої
assessment, our
реакції на його
coordinated reaction
поведінку.
to his behavior.
Наше пасивне мовчання
When we are passive, when we are silent,
– це акцепт
means that we accept
безглуздої політики, загрозливої політики
of
Путіна.
his very unreasonable and very dangerous policies and actions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm being told we're very short of time. I just want to try to get two more quick questions with quick responses. Mariia Ionova, in 1 minute or less. There are over 1.3 million registered IDPs resulting from the fighting in eastern Ukraine. Can you explain to the audience what is the Ukrainian government doing to assist these people and how can the West assist? 1 minute or less.
Okay, we have 1,500,000 IDPs. And our IDPs are not breaking the borders of Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovenia. They are all in Ukraine, and they are all trying to find their new home and to build prosperous Ukraine. We need more humanitarian aid just for building the new working places for these people, because they would like to live and work in Ukraine. And not just the last numbers, to remind you, more than 8,000 people were killed. More than 6,000 people is civilian. More than 80 children were killed. 170 children were injured. We have 10 prisoners, political prisoners in Moscow. We have 159 hostages still on occupied territory, including doctors, volunteers, and journalists. And what I would like to say that, yes, we need innovative solutions. And that was Mr. President has told that the diplomacy, we need new solutions. But we need peace, peace and security. This is the keys to economic progress in Ukraine. And united we stand. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Slava Ukraina. Героям слава. I'm very sorry. This is a fascinating series of topics, but the organizers have told me that we're out of time. So please join me, audience, in thanking the panel.